Welcome to the Resource Podcast, where we take a slightly sassy, fully feminist approach to creating healthy relationships and a joyful life. I'm your host, Tatiana Thompson, and I'm a licensed professional counselor practicing in both Arizona and Minnesota. I specialize in applying clinically proven techniques like EMDR, parts work, and neural reprogramming to help you see real, lasting change in your everyday life. Just remember, I am a licensed therapist, but I'm not your therapist. This show is for informational purposes only, and it's not a replacement for seeking personal mental health or medical advice. So join me now as we explore simple strategies for breaking toxic relationship patterns and applying simple mental health tools to your daily life. Learn how to take the small steps today that will guide you to your best life tomorrow. Hello and welcome to the Resource Podcast, the show that invites you to question everything you thought you knew about relationships and mental health so you can finally break through your stuck points and create the life you've always wanted. I'm your host, Tatiana, and I'm on a mission to help 1,000 women become emotionally and financially independent so they can choose a relationship instead of needing one. And today, I am super fired up to talk about the bread and butter of my practice, which is narcissism. Dun, dun, dun. And I'm actually super fired up today because I had an incident on my morning walk where I was solicited for sex by some men who were loitering in our neighborhood. Very, very angry about it. And I'm also wanting us as women to see how we can safely document these things, post them online, and let's get some social pressure put on these people so that they're identified and seen that they don't get to continue behaving this way and harming and scaring people. All I could think is, what if that was my 15-year-old out there today? That was really upsetting. So with that in mind, we're talking about narcissism and this inability to consider other people. We want to work on how to identify narcissistic people, and we want to learn how to avoid and manage contact with them so that we aren't getting hurt by them. So what I want to prep you for is this is a 2-part episode. Today we will discuss the traits, and then the next episode we'll discuss how to manage them. So let's get started. All right. We know labeling people as narcissistic is all the rage today, right? And people get frustrated that everybody's labeled as narcissistic. And I think we certainly do overuse this, but I'm afraid, much to the chagrin of some more traditional therapists, I am going to take a very liberal view on this. I want to give you what I consider the traits of high narcissistic wounding. I like to think of this on a spectrum, and I actually did learn this term from my mentor, who gave me a pretty good framework around it, because not all of this narcissistic wounding hits the level of narcissistic personality disorder, or what would be considered more of a stereotypically feminine perspective on it would be borderline personality disorder. These are pretty much, you could argue perhaps, two sides of the same coin of high narcissistic wounding. They just fall under what we would consider stereotypically male or female responses to these wounds. But again, I'm talking on a spectrum. So you can go all the way down at the bottom to totally secure attachment, no big trauma, no big wounding, you were cared for, the social contract was held for you as a child, all the way up to narcissistic personality disorder, heretofore I'm going to refer to as NPD, or borderline personality disorder, BPD. So at the core of either version of these personality disorders, you have the following: a deep sense of inadequacy leading to patterns of latching onto people for sustenance. You're using people, you're extracting from them due to a sense of not having enough within yourself and not believing that you can trust that other people will reciprocate. Which I know sounds really strange when we talk about with someone with high narcissism, because we think of them as like peacocking and like, I'm so big, I'm so special, blah, 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 blah. But all of that actually comes from a huge sense of inadequacy. It's that line, she doth protest too much. If you have to tell everybody, you're probably not feeling that secure, right? So this goes back again, like I said, everyone who doesn't have a secure attachment probably has some level of narcissistic wounding. I know I do. It's on a spectrum from none all the way to a personality disorder. But I argue that there's like this threshold, this line that you can cross where it becomes toxic enough that this person can't be safe to others in relationships. That's the stuff I want to talk about. The people who cross that threshold all the way up to personality disorder. Okay. That's what we're talking about. People who aren't safe because they cannot relate it in a relational way to others. So as we go through the episode, I will use the term narcissist to describe this level from toxic level all the way to personality disorder. And no, in my mind, it doesn't have to meet DSM-5 criteria for NPD or BPD to be toxic. Okay. So let's get that out of the way right now. Let's start by looking at the childhood of someone with high narcissistic wounding, aka, again, I'm going to call them the narcissist here. Okay. Someone who has this wounding lived in a world where the social contract was broken or was at least really inconsistent. And by social contract, I mean, in this world, as a child, I should be able to count on care and reciprocity from others. If I'm kind, they'll be kind. If I help, they'll help. I can be loved and protected as a child consistently. I don't have to perform for love. But somewhere along the line, this broke down for them and they didn't get the consistent care or protection that a child needs and deserves. But again, let's go back to needs. Literally, children need to know that they don't have to perform for love. These kids are often highly parentified. And I'm going to break it down kind of gender-wise again, just for stereotypes, okay? It's not a rule, okay? But let's say in the case of females that maybe tend towards more borderline tendencies later on, that they tend to be mom's partner because maybe dad or there's no partner, they don't do the job. And this is more conducive with BPD down the road because she's learning to mold herself into whatever is needed to be safe and loved. Just to give you some highlight of BPD, this is a person who tends to be a bit more chameleon-like and maybe has like love addiction, falls in love with people and becomes everything that they are, takes on all their hobbies, feels a deep fear of abandonment, strong anxious attachment, and can become very erratic and suicidal, perhaps, if this person threatens or feels like they're pulling away. That's some of the highlights of borderline personality disorder. I don't think we look at that as often. Now, let's move over to like a stereotypically male response or male circumstance. In the case of males, it can sometimes look more like becoming the king of the house. This is the boy that learns that he has all the power and is sometimes very spoiled or babied. But the problem is he isn't mature enough for that responsibility, and it's been bestowed upon him without his wishes. So he has to pretend like he knows what he's doing. And he gets all this like power, like he can get all of his siblings to do what he wants. He probably gets mom to do what he wants. He doesn't have to answer to anybody, but he also feels really insecure. So this leaves him feeling really inadequate. And he has to puff out his chest and pretend he's all wise and powerful. And it's funny, this kind of really reminds me of that line in the Game of Thrones where, like, you all know who Joffrey is, right? The really narcissistic young king. He says, "I am the king." And his father says, "Any man who must say I am the king is no king." And it's just a perfect example of how a child can become such a narcissist, but how that is, he's demonstrating how inadequate he feels by having to announce it and to throw his power around. And even his father, who is also, of course, not just a narcissist, a sociopath, calls that out. But he has shown no love or genuine care while he's growing up. It's all politics, games, and strategy. There's never any just, I love you, loyalty, compassion. And then he's told to be all powerful without having any foundation of safety that he needed. So no wonder he's not only a narcissist, ultimately a sociopath, right? But that really is an extreme example, and I just use it to highlight the way that narcissistic wounding prompts people to put on airs to compensate for their deep insecurity. So again, let's look at this overview. This child received inconsistent or honestly, probably non-existent care and compassion. They were given adult responsibilities too early or potentially no responsibility or accountability. It's kind of either end of that pendulum. They were abandoned or shamed if they got things wrong. This is a really big one to go into. Abandoning our children when they make mistakes is really a dangerous formula. Yes, we are all going to accidentally do it sometimes, but we need to be more in the habit of teaching children that we don't like their behavior as opposed to we don't like them. We accidentally convey the message that they are the problem instead of their behavior many times. And this is the distinguishment I like to talk about between shame versus guilt. Guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am something bad. And as a human being, we don't have tolerance for that. It is a terrifying thing to think I am something bad. We do not think we deserve to exist when we do that. So if you grow up as a child who is shamed for things, you learn it's not safe to take accountability because every time someone calls you out on something, you believe I am something bad. Doesn't that make sense? All right. So bigger picture, children who are raised in this way, they just don't feel safe in the world. They know no one is really looking out for them at the end of the day. Maybe when their mom needs them, they are super sweet and get them things, but then as second dad comes back, they're kind of out of the picture again. Or maybe they get to do everything they want around the house, but they never have any tenderness or someone looking out for them. They're just wandering around in the world by themselves. So here's what I want you to take from this. The number one thing this child learned about the life in general is it's every man for himself. It's every person for themselves. No one is truly looking out for me at the end of the day. If push comes to shove, I will be abandoned. I will be not supported. So I will have to do that for myself. On top of that, I can't make mistakes or I'll be abandoned. And so I always have to be perfect or I have to be performing. I have to look like I've got it all together. And the only way to get what I need is to manipulate or extract from others. I am inadequate myself. The worst part is that this child learns that they have to work so hard to protect themselves and extract from others to get their needs met, that they actually fail to develop empathy or receive the positive feedback that someone would get from doing for others. Like there's beauty in that social contract. There's joy in that reciprocity, but they never get that experience or not consistently enough to think that it's safe to do because they think, oh, the last time I did put myself out there, put my neck out, I got really hurt. So yeah, no more of that. Thanks so much. So ultimately, all other humans are a means to an end. Your wife is a person you can have sex with. She makes you look good with your friends because she's beautiful and funny. She listens to your stories. She strokes your ego. She raises your children. She cleans your house. Anybody else hearing Paris Paloma here? Oh my goodness. But do you really care about her feelings or needs? Do you see her as a person? No. Not really, unless she gets maybe upset, at which point you might give her some breadcrumbs until she's pacified and then go back to not giving a shit, right? Let's look at this even with the children of somebody who's narcissistic. Even your children are there to serve your needs. They make you feel respected and look good in the community. And the second that they embarrass you, you will turn on them and you will probably do it publicly. Or if you understand that that group is going to shun you, you do it privately. I know someone who has notoriously just smiled in front of other people when the child spills a slushie or makes a mistake and then gets in the car and says, what, are you retarded? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? What the fuck? And just starts going off on this child. How awful, right? But it's because they felt ashamed in front of some other people. Ever notice too how someone with high narcissistic wounding tends to break from their children when the children become teenagers or move into adulthood? And I argue that's because they need to be seen as godlike. And really, that's really only a thing that little kids can offer you. Once a child becomes a teenager or an adult, they're more likely to call out your poor behavior, which is going to make you defensive and make you go, oh, I'm the victim of this situation. Why are they so mean to me after everything I've done for them? You guys have heard that line, right? So as you can see, this person has learned that the only reason to do for others is to get something from them. That's why their effort can be so inconsistent, or it can taper off once they're done using you as their current drug of choice, or they completely withdraw or punish you for holding them accountable. So now that we talked about what the childhood looks like, I'd like to talk about what makes this formula toxic and not sustainable for healthy relationships with anyone. If you love what you're hearing and you're ready to take your life to the next level, consider working with me one-on-one. I can see clients located in Arizona, Minnesota, and Ohio. Imagine where you could be 1 year from now if you start your healing journey today. So what I'm saying here, guys, is I know not every therapist is going to say this. Run to the nearest exit. And I'm going to explain to you why it doesn't get better. Now, if you are one of the rare cases where it does get better, oh my God, amazing. Please private message me. I'd like to learn about it, honestly. But in most cases, it does not get better. All right. So again, most of us have some level of narcissistic wounding, right? But the question is, are we willing to look at that pattern and make some shifts? Because that right there is the number one issue for someone with toxic levels of narcissistic wounding. The inability for self-reflection and accountability. Number one trait, and it feeds into all the rest of them. This person has the inability to take real fault for anything. They cannot take accountability. Maybe there's someone who will apologize for hitting you with the car door, slightly. But I'm talking for something that they did that was harmful to you, especially if it's something that they didn't so much intend to do, but really any objective person would say, yeah, that could be harmful. So that could be an example of you tell them you don't like something that they did. They're going to deflect. They're going to get defensive. They might even punish you. They might punish you through just shutting down and not talking to you and giving you the silent treatment. And why is this? Remember, this person was trained to believe that bad actions mean I am bad. I am bad. And being a bad person is so intolerable for most humans to sit with that this person simply avoids being blamed for anything meaningful. Which leads to what I was saying earlier, which is the reason why people who are narcissistic rarely get better. It's a catch-22. If I can't take accountability and look at my behaviors that have harmed others, how can I get better and stop doing it? I can't. I'm stuck in a loop. That's the problem. That's why narcissists don't change. When they can, oh my God, it's amazing. And it takes a special kind of therapy to actually work on that. Because at first, the therapist really needs to acknowledge their victimhood and be there with them and be that empathetic witness. But at a point, they have to say, but now you can do something different and you are responsible for your behaviors now. All right. Next, top quality for someone who's a narcissist. They play the victim in almost every circumstance. When things go wrong, which they always do with someone who can't take accountability, they paint themselves as the victim or the person who didn't get treated fairly. I even like to notice the very subtle versions of this. Let's say you've got this guy who's calling his wife a bitch or a nag for asking him to finish projects that he promised to do around the house. That doesn't sound like much, but it is really manipulative because this person is the one who did the unfair thing to begin with, right? He's the one who didn't do what he agreed to do. And it's probably on a consistent basis. I'm not talking a one-off. And now he's the victim of an overbearing wife? I don't get that. Or a more insidious one, I saw this on somebody talking about a reel from couples therapy, I think, where this husband was supposedly, I'm using air quotes here, recognizing the error of his ways to his wife, where he's I'm so sorry for the way that I treated you. But he was crying and saying, I'm such an awful person. And it got to the point where she was consoling him. She was the victim. She was harmed for years, but she ended up mothering him again and having to soothe and comfort him because now he couldn't even take accountability, really. He then made himself the victim of it. See how crazy making this is? So those are just really subtle versions of it. But a simple way to watch for this is to listen to someone's stories about their exes, about their friends, about their coworkers, their bosses, their family members. If they always have things go wrong, first off, that's a sign. But if they're wronged a lot and they're telling you that it's because other people mistreated them, you may very well be dealing with a narcissist, okay? All right, next one. A lack of empathy that leads them to see others as a means to get what they want. This person doesn't really care about how you feel. By the way, here's the problem. They're really good at acting like they do. Love bombing is a thing. It is a real thing. But they're only doing that to the extent that showing you interest gets them access to what they want. So we got the super stereotypical example, right? There's a man. He's totally pretending to be interested in your whole life story. He's just doing it to get sex with you. He honestly might think in the moment he's super excited to know about you. But at the end of the day, that's all he wants. He's pretending for as long as he can get what he wants until those desires are met. But the second you aren't hitting it anymore for him or making him feel that drug, he will slow down, he will withdraw, or he'll disappear. He just wanted what he can get from you. All right, next one is a complete lack of emotional regulation skills. Now, don't confuse this with emotional reactivity. Don't confuse this with histrionic behavior or being really loud and emotional. These people can look very controlled. In fact, they're going to make you look like the crazy one because they'll pick at you until you explode with them. So I want to talk about how this crazy way that this plays out. I notice it so much in client stories, okay? The narcissist in the dynamic gets triggered by something. It's oftentimes not the person they're going to have the big fight with, right? It's their friend, it's their family member says something that upset them. And they don't have the skills to lean into the emotions and process them or even understand why they're upset. They only know how to use anger to essentially burn off their negative emotions. So, side note, I want to add this here. This is one of the reasons we see more anger and violence play out in societies where men are taught to suppress their emotions because they don't learn how to feel them. They don't learn how to burn them off with real emotions. They just burn them off through using anger. And I also want to remind people listening that anger is an emotion, and men don't get to call us the more emotional sex when they commit a majority of the violent acts and crimes in society due to anger that boils over. So going back to this dynamic with the narcissist, this person is bubbling with emotions that they are translating into anger. So they're looking now for an excuse to be angry with someone. So here you come along, you say something innocuous, you maybe breathe the wrong way, and they claim you've wronged them. They claim you're harassing them. They pick a fight because they right now are a barrel of gasoline and they're hoping to get a spark from you to set off the explosion. And if you don't take the bait, they're going to keep poking. They're going to keep finding that weak spot until you do because they need you to engage in a fight so they can spark a fire that burns off their negative emotions. They literally need an explosion. Have you ever noticed this in your own life? You're like, everything seems fine and suddenly they're upset for nothing and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing until there's this huge battle and you don't even understand where it came from. So again, someone who is a narcissist has a really hard time with emotional regulation, and let's add that to the fact that they also have a really low frustration tolerance. Any small thing starts to make their gas tank fill up really quickly, much more than the average person. So let me go over these highlights again. These are the common traits of someone who has toxic levels of narcissistic wounding, aka a narcissist, not to be confused necessarily with somebody with NPD or BPD, although they could also have these. Number one, they have very low ability to take accountability. They always want to blame somebody else, which leads into number two. They see themselves as the victim of most circumstances. Even when they wrong someone else, they see you as abusing them when you hold them accountable. And they have a lot of these circumstances. Number three, there's a complete lack of empathy or genuine care for others, and that goes beyond using others to get what they want. They genuinely have trouble understanding another person's perspective or believing that it could also be valid. Number four, they have poor emotional regulation skills, leading them to use others to burn off their negative emotions or even just to soothe them. Like, that guy who was like, oh, I feel so sad and you need to hold me now, right? They get a lot of soothing from their partners, but they don't offer the same in return. They can be really cold when that person needs support. And they have low frustration tolerance. If they don't get exactly what they want, they feel like the victim. One last thing I'd like to add here is a tendency to rewrite history from all of these behaviors before. Because in my experience, it seems that people who are narcissistic, they tend to store memories differently than others, like they record them differently. And it's always in a way that serves their narrative. And I know you know what I'm talking about. Their victimhood and inability to see more than their perspective kind of seems to lead them to record the events to meet their purposes. And now I think they actually believe that. I understand that in some cases they genuinely are lying and manipulating you overtly. But I've seen so many cases where this person genuinely believes the version of the story that they're telling, and they genuinely believe they're the victim, which is quite unnerving, as a matter of fact. So these are all levels of narcissistic wounding that are deeply problematic, and they, I believe, are not conducive with having a relationship. And again, they lead to an inability to change because if I admit I'm wrong, I am so bad that I face annihilation. So I cannot tolerate this. I cannot tolerate it anymore because I've never felt safe in the world. All right. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope this was really validating for your experience and helpful. And I hope it's helping you to consider any relationships where this is happening and understand that there's nothing you can do to change it. The next episode is going to go into how to manage it and a little bit more of why it's really important for you to stop changing this person and simply accept who they are, but to start protecting yourself. I'd love you to use these and take some small steps towards the life that you deserve and want. And remember, I want you to stop chasing and I want you to start choosing. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Resourced Podcast. My hope is that you learned at least one practical tool you can apply to your life today to move in the direction of your dreams. If you found this content helpful, be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and consider subscribing to my email list, which is linked in the show notes. And remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. What step will you take today?